Hey guys, so I just made a trip to Michael's and many of you guys have requested that I do a Michael's specific watercolor gift guide. So I recorded some footage and I'm going to do a voiceover of that. So the Michael's that I hit up this time is the Michael's in Nashville, Tennessee. It's the one at 100 Oaks. And they have a huge craft section and a tiny, dilapidated, picked over, chewed up art supply section. So your mileage may vary. And I actually plan on doing the same watercolor gift guide in Louisiana, where their art supply section is a little bit bigger, since different Michaels apparently have different size art supply sections. So if it's a regional thing, I hope you will check that one out also. So I'm going to show you what I was looking at the website, and then I'm going to show you the reality. So, in case you've never been to the Michael's website before, this is it. I opted not to use screen capturing software because I am lazy and editing on my phone. On the website, they have Cotman, they have Daniel Smith, they have Winsor Newton Professional, they have Artist Loft and Reeves, which is made by Winsor Newton. They've got Yasutomo, they've got Grumbacher. So, they've got Sakura Koi in the tubes. So on the website, they have a pretty decent selection of both just individual tubes of watercolor, watercolor sets, pan watercolors, and sort of gift sets. They've got 3 pages of them. And I picked a few interesting looking sets, like this Royal and Langnickel Zen Artist Watercolor Paint Set, just to sort of keep an eye out for when I went to Michael's today. Look, they have another Royal Talons. This is their transparent watercolor set. And then they even have this little Van Gogh plastic set. Now, 50 bucks is an outrageous amount of money, and I wouldn't recommend you pay that. But, you know, some of us we're a little bit limited. Maybe we have limited transportation, or we have someone else is buying for us and it has to be from Michael's, or we were given a Michael's gift card, or I mean, there's like a million reasons why Michael's would be your only art supply option. And their online site makes it look like they have, if not a great selection, a decent selection. It makes it look like you would be able to find, not that this is particularly great, but it makes it look like you would be able to find a lot of different watercolor supplies, and you'd kind of have your pick. And unfortunately, the site doesn't want to load. But the site itself, you know, represents a wider selection than most stores will carry. So I'm going to show you guys the Nashville, Tennessee store. So we're in the art supply section of my local Michael's. We're taking a look at the brushes. Most of them are sold in sets, and a lot of them seem to be synthetic sets of brushes at fairly high price points. Moving on over to the Reeves Watercolor and Gouache. Reeves is currently undergoing a rebrand, so you see both types of packaging here. They have some sets out for Christmas as well at a fairly hefty price point. Moving on over to the color wheels, the Reeves Gouache. I would really not recommend picking up Reeves watercolor. They're nicer watercolors at a better price point elsewhere. Some Sakura Koi watercolors, I really like those. I have reviewed those here on the channel. And then some Prang watercolors. Now, I just swatched these and I have a field test coming up, but so far they're not bad. Then we've got the Yasutomo / Niji pearlescent watercolors. Those aren't bad at all, and I have a swatch and unbox here on the channel. And then these Artist Loft watercolors, which are incredibly popular on Instagram and handle like garbage. You can check out a review for those here on this channel also. We've got a small set of Artist Loft watercolors, 24 colors, and you can't tell what's inside the package because of the way the box is, and these are tube watercolors. I'd recommend avoiding those as well. Then we've got some mixatives. You can tell that this section has been picked over. There is a set of Winsor Newton Gouache, Daler Rowney Aquafine watercolors, the children's tempera watercolors, some Hydrus watercolors left, and then we are taking a look at the tube watercolors. There are some sets from Grumbacher. The Grumbachers are retailing for about $6 each. The Cotmans are retailing for about $10 each, which is very high for both of those brands. Those are typically considered beginner brands. We have some more Reeves over here, as well as large brush sets. and I would recommend avoiding these paints over in this section. The Artist Loft pearlescents that you saw at the top briefly aren't bad though. Then we're looking at acrylic mixatives, but I'm not going to spend any time talking to you guys about acrylics. So they have 3 brands of brushes here. Cotman, Sapphire, and I missed the other one. They all seem to be synthetics. And they have Winsor & Newton Professional Gouache, then Cotman, but no full tubes of Winsor & Newton watercolor paint. And all the Grumbacher paint is Academy, which is their beginner brand. And we have some more brushes. These aren't specifically for watercolor. We have a lot of those soft, floppy white brushes. Those are typically goat hair, and those are a little stiff for watercolor. And then we've got storage. They have Art Bin, which is a good brand. I really enjoy Art Bin products, but I would not get them at Michael's as they tend to be expensive, as well as this box here, which would be great for brush storage. There's also small plastic palettes, which are ideal for mixing up large watercolor washes. And as you can see, this section is really picked over. Most things are missing, so I can't speak to those, but we will be checking out another Michael's in Louisiana, which is usually better stocked. Then we've got some acrylics and spray paints and paper. So Michael's mainly sells 2 brands, Canson, Strathmore, and then there's they do have B, but it's mostly Canson and Strathmore. So you will see Canson XL watercolor paper, which isn't bad. Strathmore watercolor paper. I do prefer the XL over the Strathmore 400 series. You'll also see some Strathmore field books down at the bottom and some spiral bound Canson, as well as some cutesy woo sketchbooks that have terrible paper that I would not recommend for watercolor. And then we have the large individual sheets of paper. This is not all watercolor paper, and it's hard to tell what is what because the way the signage works, the names are covered up. However, those prices are loud and clear and fairly overpriced. Trying to show you guys the how hard it is to find the names on these. Now, the watercolor paper is completely sold out from the section, so my Michaels must have had a sale on watercolor stuff. Here are the B watercolor paper packs. They're 100% cotton rag. I don't care for B watercolor paper. Some people do. And then 1 Lonely Arches for $30, which is a pretty high price for Arches cold press with only 12 sheets. Then we've got the pencil section, and we're looking for watercolor pencils. There are a few watercolor pencils here, but the ones we're looking for are Derwent brand, and I happen to like the Derwent Inktense. They also have the Derwent watercolor pencils, which are not my favorite. They don't have other brands that I'm familiar with, such as Caran d'Ache Supercolor 2 or Prismacolor watercolor pencils. So in the crafts section, we've got the Spectrum Aqua markers. These are dye-based watercolor markers, and they're really not bad. Unfortunately, my narration cut out. I was going to say, and I was trying to speak as quickly as possible, this is my first time doing record over narration, that the Spectrum Aqua watercolor markers really aren't bad. They're dye-based watercolor markers. I have a review and a field test of them forthcoming, but if you are looking for some watercolor markers with a brush tip that are highly water reactive, Spectrum Aqua is a way to go. And I neglected to get it, but the Jane Davenport section actually has a lot of watercolor supplies, although if you are trying to buy on a budget, I wouldn't recommend any of them because they're all overpriced and they're very much inspired by makeup, so they don't necessarily handle very well and they are a little awkward to use. For me, someone who clearly doesn't wear a lot of makeup, it's just not a very natural fit. I'm a little frustrated by the choice to pattern the packaging after makeup, since artists often struggle for legitimacy and makeup artists often struggle for legitimacy. Doing something like that might be cute and tongue-in-cheek, but it makes the materials harder to use for people who are not familiar with that form factor, and it also just becomes another way for those materials to be mocked. And honestly, the Jane Davenport stuff, it's okay. But it is certainly not worth the price, and when you add things that make it more difficult to use, I can't recommend it. So I don't have the Jane Davenport section in this watercolor sort of gift guide. So what would I recommend if you were shopping at that Michael's? Oh, and you had nothing else. The Sakura koi set. I know that is sort of a divisive topic. Not everybody likes it, but I really like the Sakura koi set. And I've recommended it many times in my beginner watercolor gift guide and my watercolor gift guide for young aspiring artists. And you can check both of those out by clicking the links down below. I would also pick up a pack or maybe some open stock. So I would get a Cotman mop. I would get a Cotman flat and like one of the 1/2-inch flats. And then I'd probably get Princeton synthetics because I'm not the biggest fan of Cotman synthetics. I don't really care for synthetics too much to begin with. I find that it just drips water all over the page, but they didn't have any natural brushes. And if, let's say somebody gave me a $50 gift card to Michael's, so I had to buy my supplies at Michael's, those are the things I would get. And if I had any money left over, I would head on over to the Jane Davenport section, which is located in the craft section, and pick up a couple water brushes because they were having a 30% off sale on Jane Davenport stuff. So I would have picked up a 2-pack of water brushes, which is what I actually did today. And then if I had any money left over, I would go get some of those Spectrum Aqua markers, probably one of the smaller sets. And that's what I would get. Sakura koi, Cotman brushes, Princeton brushes. I might pick up one of those plastic palettes depending on the price. Water brushes from the Jane Davenport section, or if your store has them, the Recollections water brushes really aren't bad and they're like always 50% off. And then the Spectrum Aqua markers. So I hope you guys enjoyed this really quick little gift guide. It was a little bit impromptu. Me learning how to do voiceovers and recording in the store is always a good time. I will see you guys again when I'm in Louisiana and I do another Michael's gift guide in a Michael's that has a better watercolor section. So thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you for being patient with me, and I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll check out my much better written gift guides over at nattasoup.blogspot.com. Bye guys!